Now I've got with me one of the most desirable cars of 2022, and it's this. It's the 2022 Subaru BRZ, the hotly anticipated little sports car from Subaru in collaboration with Toyota, and it's here on Australian soil. It's revised, it's refined, and this one has more power than the last one, which is one of the most important things. And they've given us the automatic version for our first time around in the BRZ. I'm going to also show you what's new on the outside, the inside, and of course take it for a drive on some awesome driving roads to really put this through its paces to see if it deserves the title to be one of the most anticipated and one of the most exciting cars of 2022. Now with that out of the way, my name's Cameron, this is Product Review Cars. Let's get into it. But before I start, if you want to see more sports car reviews and affordable sports cars like this on this channel, make sure you hit subscribe because this is the best way to show your support for this channel. If you're already subscribed, thank you so much. If you have anything to say, make sure you go into that comment section down below because I'm always there willing to have a chat and we'll respond to any questions, comments, or queries you might have. So let's get on with it. Now the BRZ range starts off at $38,990 before on roads for the manual transmission base model. That's a pretty decent entry price for a little sports car like this. This one here is the S model, so you get some extra creature comforts, and it's the automatic, so you get a few more safety features. You're looking at $43,990 before on roads for this specific model. Now let's talk about what's new on the outside. Well, we obviously have this cool blue paint, which you've seen on previous generations of BRZ. But we also got some new headlights. I love the new design. They have BRZ stamped in there and they look fantastic day and night. There's also a new front bumper design. This one's quite smiley. The 86 Twin is quite an angry looking face. And down either side of that smiling grille, we have some cool looking intakes, which are actually functional. There's nothing fake going on with this car. We have some headlight washers as well, and I just love the proportions of this car up front. I love how it sinks nice and low down, and you have a really cool looking front end here. Now check out this side profile. This thing just looks so much better than the last generation. I'm sorry if you're a fan of the first gen over this one, but I think most of us can agree that this just looks a whole lot better. The way they've designed this car all around, but especially from the side, is really top notch. I love the 18-inch wheels that you have here. They're alloys and they're wrapped in Michelin Pilot Sport rubber, and they're 215s, both front and rear. So much better than that Prius compound we saw on the first generation car, but it does mean that you get less slide if that's something you like doing a lot easier. You're going to have to find some harder compounds if you want to do that. These wheels and tires are very good to keep this car gripped on the road. You've also got a new side skirt design, which is quite cool. We have this giant functional aero vent on the side as well, just adding to the sporty nature of this car. We've also got this double bubble roof design up top. I love how that looks, and it also translates onto the inside, so you know, very sports car like. Rear haunches look great as well. They got some nice wide hips and some body match little bumper extensions as well, and I just like how this little spoiler looks at the back to really finish and taper off the design. To be honest, Subaru's killed this design with Toyota in making a very iconic sports car look even better. Now to say that this is just a visual improvement compared to the last generation would be criminal, because there's actually been some major improvements to the chassis. First of all, a near 50-50 perfect weight distribution both front and rear. We also have a 50% increase in torsional rigidity, which is great, and nearly 60% for the torsional rigidity up front. We even have a new lower center of gravity, which means that this thing has a lower center of gravity than the Toyota Supra. Now, if you ask me, for the price that this thing is asking, that is seriously impressive, but let's see how that translates on the road in just a bit. Now let's talk boot space on the BRZ. There is now a button at the back, which is great. The last one didn't have that, so at least you don't have to go fumbling for your keys. There is a limited opening here, but it's enough to get a small suitcase or a backpack in the back. Now you can see a giant spare tire just sitting in the back, and that's also a full-size spare. So that's really good, but it is sort of weirdly placed, and it means small items will fall underneath there and become an absolute nuisance to get out. Additionally, this car is designed to carry 4 extra tires. That is the intention for the boot space that this car can carry. You can fold the second row down and you can put your track tires and wheels in, change them at the track, and then once you're done, put your old set on and away you go. So this car isn't meant to be a family car. It can fit a couple of small suitcases, but it is designed to be a very good track car, and by being a good track car, you can also carry your own set of track wheels and tires. Now, I love these lightweight but also quite big doors that the BRZ has relative to its size, makes getting in and out quite easy. These seats have some fair amount of bolstering on them as well, so they're comfortable when you sit in them, and getting in and out's not all that hard, but it's nice to feel like you're snug once you're finally inside the car. Now, this has seen a pretty big improvement compared to the last generation. The biggest things being some slight difference in some materials that have been used, so it feels a bit more premium in here. There's a new center screen, there's a new digital display, there's some new dials for the climate controls, there's a new little cubby space in the middle, and that's really it. I really liked the interior space before, but it's just been elevated with the new generation. This center screen's very good. I really like how to use it. It's like using Subaru's new infotainment unit with a bunch of apps for navigation, for media controls. I mainly use it for Apple CarPlay. You can turn it off and on, and you can also toggle all the safety systems through this screen as well. Additionally, what's quite cool, if you're using navigation in Apple CarPlay via the screen, it will actually translate to the car's instrument cluster in front of you, so that's quite cool. And talking about this instrument cluster, you've actually got a boxer design like this engine. So I really like how that looks. The startup animation sequence is really cool. You've got plenty of information around either track data or your fuel consumption data, your trip data, or any other sort of little settings through the menu using the right little control panel on the steering wheel. You have a nice center rev counter with very easy to read dials, and it also changes if you go into track mode. Really like how that looks. And then we've got the steering wheel here, which is very well sized. Love how it's circular, not flat bottom. This one has some paddle shifters because this is the 6-speed automatic, and I really like how this feels in the hand. Nice and tight, feels great, and a good size. You can also adjust this telescopically, which is quite cool, so that makes it very easy to get comfortable. Pedal box is in a good location as well. Speakers sound decent, although you have to combat a lot of road noise. There's your eyesight cameras for your safety systems in this car, and the climate dials are very easy to operate. The buttons to go into snow and sport modes are good. Traction control off is really easy to access, same with the heated seats. But yes, for those who are wondering, for the price tag, yes, there are plenty of scratchy plastics, but they've done a decent job by fitting some nicer materials at major touch points, so at least it feels a bit more premium that way. But if you really don't like scratchy plastics, there are a few to be found in this interior. To be honest, it really doesn't bother me for how well this car drives and looks on the outside, and also for the fact that this car is a sports car first and foremost, and then everything else is secondary. Everything in this car feels as if you can just reach it without even having to fully extend your arm, which feels great as a driver, and it really feels like a driver-centric car. Passengers are very comfortable, but it's a completely different story for people who sit in the back seat. Now, should you put people in the back? Probably not, because this really is a two-seater at heart, but it might be good for kids and kids seats in the back. But let me show you what it's like to sit in the back as an adult. First of all, we got to take this little loop off to reveal the seat belt, which then goes back into its normal position. Push the seat forward and then jump on in. Yeah, look, I'm 5'11". This is very much pushing it. I had friends taller than this sit in the back, and their head was right up against the glass, understandably. There is no headroom in the back. If I fold the seat back, I get no knee room, no feet room. My feet are jammed underneath the seat, so my shoes start to feel tight on my feet. This knee room is only brought to me by the generosity of the front seat passenger by sitting a bit more upright than they probably normally would. And I just have a tiny little window at the back to have a look at what's going on. Okay, so naturally I'm gonna test to see if the claimed 6.8 second 0 to 100 time for the automatic. By the way, the manual is quicker. It's 0 to 100 in 6.3 seconds. So if you get the automatic, you're nearly a full second slower by getting this transmission. But I wanna see how true that statement is. I'm on a nice flat bit of road. I can go 100 kilometers an hour. Let's see how fast we can go there. Okay, I'm in track mode, and I'm going to use a bit of a torque converter launch. So, foot on the brake, accelerator, in 3, 2, 1. .82 on the dot. So that's exactly what Subaru claims with this automatic transmission. So there you go. You have a fair 0 to 100 times 6.8 seconds for the automatic. Now, what do we have going on here? We have a 2.4 litre naturally aspirated petrol flat 4. That's 0.4 litres bigger than the previous generation, and now we're up to 174 kilowatts and 249 newton meters of torque. So we have more power coming from this motor as well. So it's a torquier motor and it's got more power to it, all being sent to the rear wheels via this 6-speed automatic transmission. Now, I'm going to keep saying it, but that manual would just really feel like a true connection to this car. These automatic, just straight off the bat, unless you cannot drive a manual for whatever reason, just get the manual. Just get it, because the automatic is fine. It makes it a good daily driver, but that's not what the purpose of this car is. I really love the chassis and steering feel. It really feels direct. Just small adjustments to the wheel you can feel through the entire car. The rear wheel drive also is very engaging, so it allows me to feel that power through the back and steer with the front tires. Now I'm on a bit of a complicated bit of road, and I need to avoid potholes, and I need to go through corners briskly, but without losing control. So this is one of those things that I need to, really feel the car for, and that's the amount of feedback I get through this car is gonna help me with that. Now everyone knows about the infamous torque dip in this previous generation motor. It still exists, but it's completely ironed out compared to the last generation. The torque dip meant that when you were around 4,000 RPM, which is where people normally drive, the actual torque number started to go below its peak performance, and so that meant you were stuck in a bit of a hole of despair, and when you went to accelerate, it just did not feel as powerful as it should have. And now that torque dip's been lifted, so the bottom of that torque dip is now more than what the peak power was from the previous generation in terms of its torque figures. So it's quite nice to see that Subaru and Toyota have gone ahead and actually properly listened to customers and done an actual improvement to this motor that has done wonders for its feel. I drove the previous generation when I didn't work this particular job, so there's no videos of me driving it, but what I did find is that torque dip was well and truly there, and the car wasn't all that fast, but it didn't really bother me because I thought the driver engagement was enough that I could have plenty of fun in the speed limit, and that still reigns true here. However, this additional power really elevates this into a much quicker car. We're looking around 130 kilowatts per ton, and I'm just really feeling that through the rev range. So if I pull down, for example, and then we go to sort of squeeze that throttle, we actually pull through the rev range, which is great. It doesn't just taper off like a turbocharged motor, so it's part of the appeal in getting a naturally aspirated motor like this. Now, Porsche is a pretty cool brand. I'm a big fan of it. I love their flat 6 engines, and yes, they used to use flat 4 engines, and we have a flat 4 engine here, and that's what I love about this car, is that it's got a very unique motor that has been tried and tested in motorsports years ago, but here it's a lot of fun in its modern application. Now the brakes are pretty good as well. I'm going to go for an emergency brake test at this cone in 3, 2, 1. And there we go. So that's pretty good. I do think the response from these brakes are quite decent, and it really feels like this car is under my control, even though I'm driving the automatic version. There's a couple of drive modes here. There's snow, which basically doesn't let the car go into first gear, allows you to try and get as much traction as possible on loose surfaces. There's sport mode, which is really just to hold gears and make them hold for longer and a bit more of a sportier feel. You've got a track mode here, which then changes the instrument cluster to make it easier to read for your revs and gears, and then puts your speed below that, and that basically limits your traction control, turns it off, but it keeps your vehicle stability control on. If you want to turn all that stuff off, you just press and hold the traction control off button there. So I do like driving in track mode because it allows a bit more play, but it doesn't mean I'm completely scared about overcooking it. The car's still got a little bit of a loose guideline on me, but it's not as aggressive as it is if you were in normal or sport mode. Now steering feel is fantastic. We're going through this corner, I'm going to load up the front, the steering gets heavier, I go to accelerate, the steering gets lighter. Ace, love that, really, really good. My driving position is fantastic as well. I've got a great view out of the cabin. Yes, there's a bit of a blind spot when you're really going through tight corners on the rear 3 quarters, but that's not a major issue before day-to-day driving. That's really just for those tighter corners, but usually you push out a bit more, you can see plenty of the road with these giant side windows. Fuel consumption's actually been pretty decent as well. It's been below 10 liters per 100 Ks. Really impressed with that for a car like this. And really, I'm having the time of my life driving this thing. It's better than any hot hatch I've driven in terms of driver engagement, simply because it's rear-wheel drive and you have the front wheels just doing the steering. I'm having a great time in this car. I love the previous generation so much so I was nearly going to buy it. This generation, I was lined up to get it before I started this job, and then I sort of went, let's pull back and see what it's actually like, because I get to drive it as part of my job. And I'm telling you what, it might join the stable later this year. It is that impressive. I'm really loving it. I love a flat four experience. I love the low center of gravity as well. It's really obvious here. So going through corners, I've hardly felt any lean or any sort of feeling of understeer that is non-existent really on these roads. Unless you really start pushing, you're going to start feeling some oversteer from the back. Now, I've driven these cars on track as well in the previous generation. I love the control that they gave you there. With the increased torsional rigidity, I definitely see having a massive advantage going through corners. Although yes, the power has been increased, you don't have an enormous amount of torque, where a turbocharged motor from a slightly more expensive 2-litre turbocharged engine from, say, Hyundai might just give you a bit more torque that way. But to be honest, I'm not missing it all that much. I'm having a great time just feeling out this car. The ratios in the 6-speed automatic are just slightly too long though. I'm really not being able to see the top of rev range without, really getting higher up into the speed limit. I'm not a big fan of that. I'd much prefer to be able to, have a shorter second to third, and then third could be longer for those track days. Now, is it easy to kick out the back like it was in the previous generation? Sort of. What I've found, these tires are definitely a lot grippier. The Michelin Pilot Sport tires are an excellent choice for this car, and the 215 size is quite good, which allows you for plenty of road feel. But if you want to get a little bit more silly sideways, you can sort of play with the edge of that and you can really have a good time with it. So going through a corner, for example, getting higher up in the rev range, and then we're going to go through this sharper corner up here. Here we go, going through, and then it doesn't really want to step out when you stomp on it. The previous generation did, because of those skinnier Prius tires, but here we have a huge amount of grip for a car like this, and it's making it quite a formidable track weapon. Yes, they already race these, but this thing is more potent than ever, and I would be scared to see one with a few more mods to make it a bit more powerful, to know how quick that thing with its chassis and actual vehicle control would be with just a smidge more power. I don't really want more power in this. Like I said, I think this is absolutely fine, but I can see the appeal of just doing some small mods to it to really get more out of it. But regardless, I'm really feeling like I'm missing out on one element of engagement, and that would be being able to shift by myself with a clutch pedal and a proper 6-speed manual. Okay, now it comes to actually spending money on this thing. Should you buy it, consider it, or leave it? I think you should buy it, but with an asterisk, unless you really want the automatic or need to drive the automatic, because you either like how, easy it is to drive, you don't mind it being a bit slower because it's a bit more comfortable to drive day to day, you get some extra safety features. Look, I can respect that, but you should get the manual. And it's because of two reasons. One, I just feel like I'm missing a bit of engagement by not being able to shift my own gears using a clutch pedal. And two, it's objectively better because the manual is faster by nearly a full second, which matters when you don't really have a turbocharger under the bonnet. Now, talking what's under the bonnet, excellent power plant. I like what they've done with it. It's unique. It also sounds quite decent now, and it also has plenty of power to go with it. So people can't really say it's super slow anymore. But I'm sure the jokes would still remain, because there is that video floating around of a Prius out dragging the old version of this car. Now, I really like the way this looks. I love the design. I love the chassis improvements. I love the grip that you get now, but be careful. It does slip out a little bit on loose surfaces. Other than that, it really isn't as, too playful or too rear and happy as the previous gen. I think the luxury appointments and safety features that come with this car are really good as well, and I actually love driving this car as a whole. It's easy to drive in the city, it's good on fuel, has enough space for people like me who just want one, maybe two passengers. And additionally, you don't have to drive a convertible to get this sort of experience. Unless you want that, then you go get an MX-5. I also love how there's a decent amount of boot space as well for 1 to 2 people, because even though it hasn't got a very tall boot, you can still fit those track tires and wheels in, and I think that's great. Additionally, there's also a full-size spare. So overall, I would say buy it, but you have to wait for my review on the manual version of this car to get an absolute recommendation to confirm my suspicions this is the best sports car below $100,000 in 2022. Now, so you don't miss out on that review and any other reviews just like this one, make sure you hit subscribe to show your support for our channel here at Product Review Cars. My name's Cameron. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.